All right, I am recording. Hi, welcome to the maze. I'm Carl, or as everyone knows me, the master of mazes. This is my son, Steven. He calls himself the apprentice. Uh, Steven, if you
What's
want to
going on,
introduce yourself?
guys? Yep, I'm Carl's son Steven. How's it going? Good to get on video here and talk about some of this stuff.
Yeah. So, a lot of you are probably asking if this is your first time hearing about us or just kind of stumbling across us on YouTube. Probably asking yourselves, what is the maze about? Um, the maze comes from a lifelong enjoyment of TTRPGs, tabletop role playing games, if you're not familiar with the term. More specifically, Dungeons and Dragons, which I've been playing since the early 80s. And it's just branched out over the decades into science fiction, love of Tolkien, Star Wars, Star Trek, um, Starship Troopers. I mean, you name it. If it's science fiction or fantasy or a tabletop role playing game, I'm probably played it or I'm into it. Fallout, things of that nature. What we want to do with the maze is we want to take our love for games and for the gaming community and kind of bring it out and find more people who are like-minded and connect and kind of bounce ideas off of each other and just make a community here on YouTube where we can all get together and exchange ideas and share our love for TTRPGs. Uh, Stephen, what do you think? What are your ideas on where we want the maze to go?
Uh, Pretty much what you said. It seems like a lot of the creators in the space are kind of massive, and they kind of lose sight of the whole reason that we're all doing this is because we enjoy it, right? And we want to kind of show other people, what we're about and the things we're doing, and I think we kind of fit right in that middle ground where we're hitting the smaller guy and we're going to the shops that nobody's talking about on Instagram, and we're able to bring kind of this different take and this material that gets lost in the shuffle and kind of lost in the weeds with these bigger guys. And nothing against them. I mean, they're doing something that's obviously working for them, but kind of what I find interesting is kind of what I consider grassroots, like nerd stuff. Stuff that a lot of people aren't covering, a lot of people don't know about. I found out all kinds of things that I didn't even know, and I grew up around it, and I was involved with this stuff my whole life, and kind of getting into this and getting the exposure to this kind of stuff. It's kind of opened up a new avenue that I didn't even realize. And my dad will probably touch on this. I played D&D a lot as a kid just through dad, but in my life I wasn't like a D&D person that played all the time. And then this project we started kind of reignited that whole like fantasy urge for me. I have been working a lot and doing a lot of other things, and it's kind of cool to see this grow and kind of my interest gets pulled along with it, and I get back into it. And so just kind of what he said, just a little bit more. But just it's cool to see this thing kind of take a life of its own, and we're kind of along for the ride like everybody else. So it's been a fun ride. It's been, I guess, 7-ish months that we've been doing it, and we've come a long way. And this was kind of a I had a quiet day at work and just was like, hey, what if we made a website? And what if we actually tried to reach out to people that weren't seeing us on Instagram yet, and what would that look like? And it's been pretty
Right.
awesome. So
Yeah, yeah, good stuff. So let me ask you. People ask me all the time, what brought you into the community? Um, Again, lifelong love of the games, and I wasn't really much of a social media person until probably right around 2000, 2001. Firefly was a big thing for me when it aired on Fox, and again, a great science fiction western by Josh Whedon. Unfortunately, killed off just through mishandling and just time jumping all over the place. The network just didn't seem to get it. So that got me involved in social media. I've reached out to fans online and got involved that way, and it's just kind of bounced out from there. I found D&D communities online, Fallout communities, things of that nature, people I can just talk to and bounce ideas off of, and have met a lot of great content creators that way. What about you, Stephen? What has gotten you kind of more involved with the online community?
um, I think a lot of it for me was always kind of gaming. Yeah, I grew up being a pretty serious gamer, and that comes with the territory, right? You're kind of online, um, checking out stuff like competitive people online, and kind of looking up guides of games, and that kind of led me down the there's something people that know me, like Dad, everybody will know I'm not like a social media person. Like I don't care about social media at all. And this project actually kind of has turned that around a little bit. You know, I'm involved with this and then with the site and all that, but um, my exposure to a lot of nerd stuff was through looking up video game stuff, guides, previews, and all that. And that's what I kind of was like, oh, let me check out YouTube and Instagram and all this stuff. Um, but to speak to like you were talking about what got me into D&D. Well, I mean I grew up with it. You know, I mean I remember uh, being really young and seeing the monster manual on your bookshelf downstairs and was just like saw the beholder on the front and I'm like, well, that looks cool as shit. Like, what is that thing? You know, and that's from there. It's just like I always liked monsters and sci-fi and horror movies even when I was a kid. So like this thing seemed cool and there was a book full of monsters. I was like, oh, that's freaking awesome. You know, I would just read through that over and over again. And from there, it's like, oh, there's a whole like setting and like a game tied to this. So that's pretty cool, you know. And that's pretty much where it went. So
Right. Um, so, what people ask too, and I get questions like this a lot on Instagram and things. What are your favorite parts of the nerd or the geek culture? I'd have to say the very first thing that kind of brought me into fantasy was probably 80s sword and sorcery movies, things like Dragon Slayer, Sword and Sorcerer, Conan, things like that kind of piqued my interest as a younger man. And I remember when my mom brought me home a book called The Hobbit by J.R.R. Tolkien. And I had never read it before, and this was 1981. And I read that book and fell in love with it, fell in love with Middle Earth and Tolkien's descriptive narratives, and it just opened up all new worlds for me. My cousin Jerry brought home Dungeons and Dragons one day, first edition Dungeons and Dragons. He was involved in a Dungeons and Dragons club at school in high school, and his English teacher was his first dungeon master. So he became my first dungeon master, and we would sit around the table on weekends and we would play Dungeons and Dragons. And just all weekend long. We would start Friday afternoon. We would make dinner, have dinner. We would play Dungeons and Dragons till we got too tired to stay up. Then we would go to bed. And then we would get up Saturday morning and we would rinse and repeat. We would play Dungeons and Dragons all day, have lunch, you know, and sometimes watch movies in between or whatever. But it was just kind of it was an immersion thing for me. So, for me, my favorite parts of it are definitely tabletop role playing games, more specifically Dungeons and Dragons, Lord of the Rings series, things of that nature. How about you, Stephen? If you had to earmark one or two things that you really enjoyed about the nerd or the geek culture, what would they be?
Lord of the Rings, without question. I grew up with those movies coming out. Like it seemed like that was like took the world by storm, and I remember seeing them for the first time. I remember the trailer for Two Towers on television. When people used to see
Mhm.
trailers on television, I remember seeing that and was like,
Right,
I remember getting like having anxiety when Hell's Deep was happening. You know, like they're coming, and I was like a child, and I was like, oh my god,
right,
like this is terrifying. You know, and those were easily the most formative. Still are. I still read about them. Everybody will tell you I'm like a huge lore nerd for Lord of the Rings. I love it. Um, so that's
right,
a big one. Actually, that's a huge one. That's probably like the most formative like fantasy thing for me is Lord of the Rings. Not even close. And I grew up with two with Harry Potter, which is another thing that's very cool. It's not quite in the D&D vein like Lord of the Rings is, but still, like I grew up with a lot of that stuff and still really love it. And I think as far as like tabletop games, obviously I grew up playing D&D with Dad and with our group, various different groups, and throughout my life, and that was a big one. And I keep saying it, but video games, like basically video games, most of them are role playing games of some kind. Like you're doing something, and video games are a
yeah,
massive, like formative thing for me. They were an escape for me. They still are. My my longtime girlfriend is right now playing Skyrim, and I'm like rewatching her play it for the first time. She's never played it, and she's playing it now, and it's like fun again to watch. Like that's what, in my opinion, that's what these things are about. They're about you know not just enjoying it when you were a kid, enjoying it when you were in high school, but like passing
right,
that on to other people and like kind of like you're acting as stewards for these things. Like, this thing was so special to me, and now she's playing it. It's a special again, and like that's kind of what this whole, and to kind of go off on a tangent here, but still somewhat related. That's what this website and this thing is. That's the whole point of this. Is
Right.
like, my dad is passionate about this thing, and it's like, before Stranger Things came and brought that mainstream again, he was passionate before that. He was passionate when nobody gave a shit about Dungeons and Dragons. So it's like, you know, taking something that you love and showing people why you love it, why it's cool, and sharing that with them again. And it's special through them. And that's, again, going back to, what I was saying is like, that's what my favorite part of it is, that it's so easy to share and it's so broad. It encapsulates movies, books, video games, tabletop games, art. I mean, music, even like dwarf metal and all this craziness that's out now. It's like it's everywhere now, and it's more popular now, and you're not made fun of for liking it now. And it's just
Yeah.
it's
Like
cool. It's
it
cool.
is. Yeah. Yeah, yeah, and that's a big change. It's a great point you bring up that now it's more acceptable socially, um, especially online. Stranger Things did that. Critical Role helped make it mainstream, helped bring it into more households, and make it acceptable. You weren't picked on, you weren't singled out, you weren't ostracized by your peers. I remember growing up, it was, I came up through the Satanic Panic, and that's a whole thing. We can have a whole nother conversation about at some point down the road.
Hmm.
But yeah, now it's acceptable, it's cool. There's a lot more people playing it, and I enjoy the fact that I can get out there with people, and people who are new to the game, and kind of expose them to how big a world they're stepping into, and just how great a world that can be if you open yourself up to the possibilities. So that brings us up to another great thing. Favorite D&D memory. For me, it's probably honestly going to be sitting around the table with very young Stephen and his sister Audrey, and my wife and a few other people we had in our group, and playing Dungeons and Dragons for the first time together. And Stephen and Audrey made a pair of elven brother and sister pair. One was a thief, one was a ranger, and they decided that when their mother, the cleric, stepped in and tried to prevent them from looting a body, that they weren't having any of that. And the next thing you know, there's a little PvP going on where
Hmm.
she's trying to cast. She's trying to cast obscurement to keep them from coming after her, and they're basically just. It has turned into a whole thing. There was a lot of dice rolling, there was a lot of laughing, and just having a great time at the table, and that's what it's all about. It's just helping people just relax and have a great time and just kind of go with the flow of things. So, for me, that's always one of the memories I treasure the most about D&D.
Yeah, mine. I mean,
How about you, Stephen?
I think you saw my notes before this, but mine is the exact same thing. So, and maybe not as sentimental, but like it is. When me and Audrey played brother sister, and I think she was the thief and I was the ranger. Maybe I don't remember, but basically it didn't
Yep.
matter
Yeah,
because
that's right.
we were just screwing with people the entire time. Like that's why we were there. So like, I just remember like every time we would play, like whoever was there. Not everybody could make it every week, so we'd kind of pick our victims out, and we would just literally screw with them all night, and it was super fun. And you kind of made that happen, right? Because it was our first game, like you said, and I didn't know what to expect. I was like, okay, well, they do this every weekend, and it seems fun, and like you were finally like, yeah, just do it. And I remember being like, wow, it was like making the football team. Like I can stay up late and I can do this. Like that's so cool. And then we just like
Yeah.
I mean, like it was like an episode of Jackass every time. Just had to like mess with people, and I mean, it was awesome. I mean, it was fun, and definitely looking back, it's just like that was a super cool memory. And like, did I offer very much to the story? No, but trying to like put stolen gold in people's pants and get them arrested. That's like what it's all about. It's
Yeah.
just like those things. It
Right.
was a super formative time. It was super fun, and yeah, that's 100% mine too. Not even close. That was awesome.
Awesome. So, favorite campaign setting. For me, I grew up in with Greyhawk. That was the first campaign setting from Gary Gygax that kind of came out and was a major retail product. I had that box set, so the first few games I played with my cousin were in Greyhawk, but I remember when Ed Greenwood's Forgotten Realms box set dropped, and that was during the time of second edition Dungeons and Dragons, and I picked it up just because the cover art intrigued me. And I brought it home and I started reading through the books. And I tell you, there's something about Ed Greenwood's writing. It's easy to see that he poured a lot of himself into this setting. And that just came across in the lore and the settings and the descriptions and things of that nature. And it just, for me, that became the first living, breathing campaign setting. And I have been playing in a campaign setting of the Forgotten Realms ever since. I mean, we cross, sometimes into other planes like Ravenloft or something of that nature, but we always our campaigns start and the majority of them are based in the Forgotten Realms. How about you, Stephen? If you've got a favorite campaign setting, what would it be?
Hate to say it again, but basically the same. So I remember, and it's the reason for it is I remember the Ravenloft handbook on your shelf when I was a kid, and I'm like, you know, most people here probably don't know who I am, but I'm a huge like monster movie nerd, and I love the Universal monsters. And I remember the Ravenloft cover basically looking like a Dracula book, right? So I saw that and was like,
Yeah.
that's clearly the coolest one. And then, as you get more into the lore and stuff, like the Sword Coast is super cool, and that's obviously, Forgotten Realms and stuff. That was, probably what I could relate most to, like a Lord of the Rings style setting would be that. I'm sure there's tons more that I just don't know about, but I think I'm right there with you. Like Forgotten Realms, Sword Coast, like Neverwinter, Baldur's Gate stuff, and then Ravenloft is just like the vibe is too cool to not put on this list. It's awesome.
Oh, yeah, yeah. I would say for me too, Ravenloft is it's up there. It's definitely up there, especially now with fifth edition bringing out Curse of Strahd. Well, it's been out for a while now, but that bringing Ravenloft back to the forefront when it had been kind of pushed to the side for a while. That really, I love that horror element. I love that mystery element. I know for a while when I first got the Realms of Dread box set, I know every time I love messing with my players because every single time I would tell them, well, a fog moves in or a mist moves in, they would start freaking out, running away because they didn't want to go to Ravenloft. So I know to this day my wife still gets chills when I tell her in a game that there's a mist on the ground when you awaken or when you go to bed at night as you go to take your long rest, and a mist moves in and the moon is full and you hear a wolf howl in the distance, and then she starts freaking out. We got to get out of here. So it's kind of fun to mess with your players like that from time to time, keep them on their toes. Um, Favorite class or race? For the longest time, my favorite race was probably an elf. I mean, the very first character I played in first edition was an elf. But as I kind of grew and matured, I definitely kind of got away from elves. My last major elf character, since I'm pretty much a forever DM, was a ranger by the name of Dantalis Willowwood. That was a second edition ranger that I played for a long time. We played them up to 12th level before that campaign came to a close. That was a memorable character. He still makes appearances from time to time as an NPC that kind of offers the party guidance or help from time to time. Not a DMPC because I don't do that, but I definitely have him as a NPC that the party can interact with from time to time. But now, as I've grown and kind of stretched out, definitely a dwarf, which is heavily inspired by Tolkien and just the Song of Durin and just the whole story with Khazad-dûm, and just something about the dwarves appeal to me. Their tenacity, their just how hard they work, how hard they fight, how hard they party when they party. There's just something that appeals to me about them as a race. Uh, and Steve, I know for you it's probably a dwarf as well.
Yeah, hate to keep saying it, but 100%. It's always. I mean, you know that it's always been that way in everything. In every fantasy I can play them, I play
Yeah.
them because I am just that kind of person, headstrong, right into the middle of it. I just love the. I mean, I don't know of a single fantasy setting that the dwarves aren't like the coolest race. Like In Lord of the Rings, they're awesome. In
Yeah.
D&D, they're awesome. And Elder Scrolls, for people that don't know, they're called the Dwemer, and they're like extinct, but they're also awesome. Like everything that they're in, they're the coolest ones. Not even close. Elves are
I
lame.
just
Sorry.
wish, just, I just wish that they would make an appearance in Skyrim. All you
Yeah,
get is
yeah.
ruins and mist. So,
Yeah,
but
it's
yeah.
they're just the
Um,
coolest ones. But I will add a like an asterisk to this question, um,
mhm,
because I've always liked to play them, but like in an unconventional way. So like obviously the conventional way
right,
is like warrior or whatever. But I always
right.
thought, and I think we've even had this discussion on Discord, but like a dwarf ranger was always so cool because it kind of goes against their
Yeah,
nature, right? It was like this just run into everything, kind of like a berserker, just two hatchets going in. But I always thought like a dwarf hunter was such a cool like play off of that. So anyway, is there like when you play one, do you have like a certain like fantasy style? Like I like to
yeah.
play a dwarf, but
I mean,
it's
I've got a friend. Yeah, I've got a friend that started it's one of the people that's in my paid game on Friday. He decided he wanted to try his hand at DMing and give me a break since I'm always on the DM side of the screen. So he decided to run a Pathfinder 2 game, and I'm like, no brainer. I'm playing a dwarf. But then when I started looking at the class options and the build character builds and stuff, I leaned towards the ranger, um, and you get to pick kind of what your chosen terrain is. And I chose, hills and mountains. I mean, it just that kind of goes with a dwarf, right? So, I mean, dwarves not only guard their fast or their steading, but they're going out and they're guarding caravans and they're scouting the area, maybe hunting for food or looking for new, mineral veins or what have you. So I thought a ranger would be fun to play. So I got to play that for about 3 or 4 sessions before that game was put on hiatus due to some scheduling conflicts. But I look forward to getting back to that Ranger at some point. So, I guess, what's next for the maze? I would like to see this video. I mean, obviously, my background is a pair of drapes. I'd like to see me get into something more of a recording studio, something that looks a little more professional, a little more themed. But I'd like to see us do some more videos. Videos on pretty much everything. I mean, not only Dungeons and Dragons and role playing games, but maybe movies and comic books and books and things like that. Not only new stuff, but maybe dabble back into some older things, like from the 70s and 80s and into the 90s and stuff like that. Talk about those things, have guests on the show. One good thing about Instagram and my dabbling into the community is I've met a lot of great content creators, um, people who have a different twist at their approach to DMing and role playing than I do, which has kind of opened my eyes up to some new possibilities for me to expand my game and kind of sharpen and hone my own skills. But I'd like to bring some of them on. I have met online Rose Estes. Rose Estes was one of my favorite authors as a kid growing up. As I got into Dungeons and Dragons, she wrote the Endless Quest books.
I will
So I've
say
got to
right
meet her
there.
son Daniel.
Yeah, those books are. I think we have. I don't know how many times we've shouted them out on the site, on Instagram. The Endless Quest books are awesome. That's another thing that I saw as a kid, on Dad's shelf, and then I eventually probably stole. But there, I can't remember the name of it. But there was like one book cover that just like when I thought of fantasy, I thought of that book cover. It was, and I think I have a shout out of that.
Probably Pillars of Pentagon. Pillars of Pentagon with the Draco Lich, or it's probably going to be the Dungeon of Dread with the Water Weird.
That's
Those are
it. It's
great
got
covers.
the
Elmore
yeah
covers.
yeah. That's it.
Water Weird, yeah, that's
Yeah,
Dungeon of Dread. And again, Elmore art. I actually have those prints from the first three um, Endless Quest books that have been signed by both Larry Elmore and Rose Estes. Those hang in my hall, and I've got so much art. But I like to be surrounded by those things because they remind me why I do this. They remind me of that big, wide fantasy world that's out there for me to explore with other players, and that's why I do it. So at some point, yeah, I'd like to have Daniel on the show with us. I'd like to have maybe his mother Rose on the show with us, and just extend an invitation to any content creator that wants to come on with us, sit down and chat and just kind of go over things. I would love to do that. But yeah, that's kind of the way I see us moving. How about you, Stephen? What do you see us doing with this thing in the future?
I mean, there's some like hard goals I have, and then also some kind of other ones that aren't quite as bullet pointy. But obviously, right now we're expanding into what I consider like a VOD format. Like, we'll probably have some of this video cut up into kind of like a quick like this question, what did we say style videos on Instagram, and probably have that on the YouTube channel that you made as shorts to kind of just have that in the algorithm void somewhere that people might stumble on. And we're going to take probably a while to cut up. I mean, this video now is 25 minutes, so probably cut this one up and adjust some of the audio and stuff. But we'll probably get some highlights out there. So VOD format is number one. I mean, we don't have any video format as of now, just pictures and text, which is fine. But we're diving into a different side of it. And like I said, you made the YouTube, so that's a whole different platform that we have never been on. We've never had any kind of association with until now, which is super cool. There's obviously a lot of people that are only on
Right.
YouTube. They don't really go on Instagram and look for reels or anything like that. So hoping to hit some of that. Um, and you touched on, kind of again, this is kind of going back to a different point where it's like, why you do it and that kind of stuff. And I wanted to make a point. I wrote this down earlier when we were talking about it. But part of what I think is so cool about this culture and not just like fantasy and nerd culture, but really anything like this kind of stuff is, real life. A term in video games is pay to win, right? They're games where you can just start the game up and you play, and it's like, oh well, I'm not good at this game. I pay $50 and I get the best stuff. And what I like about
Right.
D&D or this kind of stuff, it's like you can have a horrible job, horrible day, whatever it is, and you get to your game and you get to sit down with your friends, and it doesn't matter if you had a terrible day. It doesn't matter if you make $14 an hour. None of that matters anymore because you're in this place now.
Right.
And it's like a different level of escapism that you don't really see in other places. Even like as much as I love video games, there is video games that it's like even there it's pay to win, and it's like D&D kind of like takes this back seat. It's like you get to kind of get off the roller coaster for a minute, and you're like, okay, now
Right.
I'm playing this other person in this other world, and none of these problems matter. And I think in a fast-paced world like we live now, where you want everything now and you wanted it yesterday, and it kind of forces you to slow down and forces you to kind of take this different role, and it's cool. It's I mean it's People have their own ways of doing that. This is only one of them, but I think it's kind of important to point out that that is a cool outcome of this. Um,
Right.
and that's what we kind of we champion that thinking is like, hey, around this thing, around this table or whatever, everyone's kind of the same, millionaire or you're
Right.
barely making ends meet, everyone's happy at the table, everyone wants you there, and that's kind of the crux of all this, and probably the wrapping up point of this is like that's the kind of community we're trying to cultivate is like everyone's welcome, we want everyone here, we're that guy that's still in the we're still in the mix with everybody else. Obviously neither one of us are super famous. We both work 9 to 5s and probably will forever. And that's exactly where I like us to be because we get to kind of do these things
Right.
and talk about things and get to meet people that are otherwise not met. So that's kind of the whole thing that we've been really enjoying is seeing that side of it. So anyway, that's I just wanted to add on to what you said earlier, and kind of like I said, the plan, more VOD content and
Yeah.
stuff like that. Um,
Great,
so
great points. Great points. So I guess with that, we'll wrap this video up because we know, if we go past 30 minutes, people are dropping off. If you've stuck around this long, we appreciate you. We hope that you'll take a moment to click on that subscribe button. Follow us. We'll have content coming out, hopefully, I'd say probably every 2 weeks, maybe 3 weeks to begin with until we can kind of hammer our schedules out. But then we'd like to become a little more regular and put out more content and have some guests on side. But comment in the comments below. Give us a like, subscribe if you're like it, and we will see you in the maze.
thanks.